There were a hammer, a block of wood, and a steel cup in a transmutation circle. They transformed into another object. There was a woman who was hanging a white cloth in front of her house. 2 little boys came out of the house. They were the sons of that woman. Those 2 boys showed their alchemy works to their mother. Their mother praised them for their cleverness. The names of those boys were Ed and Al. They ran happily because their mother praised them. But suddenly, their mother fell and passed away. Because of their mother's death, they only lived with each other. They were starving and cold. They didn't have any relative anymore. Ed said that he once read about the homunculi, a real artificial human, in an alchemy book. They wondered if they could bring their mother back to life with it. Human creation was forbidden for all alchemists. They decided to execute their ideas secretly. For days, they had been reading books and preparing the ingredients needed for their experiment. They managed to collect all the ingredients. Al was unsure about the experiment at first, but Ed convinced Al so they could meet their mother. They put the ingredients in a transmutation circle. They prepared themselves to perform transmutation. The wind started to blow heavily. The lightning started to strike. Their house started to collapse. The heavy wind blew Al's body away. Ed tried to reach Al's hand, but he failed. Because of their transmutation, Ed had to lose his left leg and Al had to lose his body. Ed moved his right arm to put Al's spirit into a steel armor. Because of it, Ed replaced his left leg and right arm with automails. The teenage Ed was chasing a man. He tried to get the Philosopher's Stone from that man. This was the beginning of Ed and Al's adventure to get the Philosopher's Stone that could help them bring their body parts back. With the help of the Philosopher's Stone, that man attacked Ed relentlessly, but Ed didn't give up. He became excited instead. Ed put his hands together and then put them on the ground. He managed to perform transmutation without the transmutation circle. When he almost got attacked, Al came to help him by destroying the ground that had transformed into wild animals. Ed was known as a genius. He was called Full Metal Alchemist because of it. The man destroyed the building behind Ed. The ruins of the building hid Ed's body, but Ed managed to save himself. He continued to chase the man. Apparently, the man was a priest who had swindled many people. He took a woman as a hostage and threatened to kill her if Ed came near him. Ed transmuted a giant statue and attacked that priest. When Ed's hand touched the priest's hand, their bodies bounced and the stone slipped. When they tried to get the stone, the colonel came to stop them. He ordered his subordinates to arrest Ed and the priest for making some troubles. With one finger snap, the Philosopher's Stone that was chased by Ed and the priest was burnt. This showed that the stone was fake. The priest who got arrested ran away. Meanwhile, Ed was brought to Eastern headquarters. From the top of a building, there were some people who were watching the incident. They were luz, gluttony, and envy. At the same time, there was a woman who just arrived at a train station. After the incident, Al fixed all the problems that were caused by his brother. They thought Al was the famous Full Metal Alchemist who had been becoming the national alchemist since he was 12 years old. He corrected them by saying that the real Full Metal Alchemist was his brother, Ed. Everybody refused to believe and laughed at him. They didn't believe it. After that, a woman called Al. She was Winry, a woman who arrived at the train station before Ed was at the Eastern headquarters. Colonel Roy asked Ed to stop looking for the Philosopher's Stone, but Ed refused to give up because everything that he had done was to bring Al's body parts back. Captain Hughes came to greet Ed. He was followed by General Halcrow. General Halcrow greeted Ed by shaking his hand. He also asked about Al and wanted to meet him. After that, Captain Hughes and Ed walked together and talked about Colonel Roy. Ed asked Captain Hughes why he was at Eastern headquarters. Captain Hughes said that he came for an investigation. After they finished their conversation, Winry came and called Ed. She ran and saw Ed's automail arm. She scolded Ed for damaging her work. Captain Hughes smiled when he saw them. Colonel Roy and the general talked about Captain Hughes' arrival, which could be a secret mission. The general asked about someone called Sho Tucker. The colonel said that he was a national alchemist who transmuted chimera, a synthesis of mutant and animal. The general asked the colonel to introduce Al and Ed to Dr. Tucker. The swindler priest was with lust, gluttony, and envy. He blamed them for giving him a fake Philosopher's Stone. Lust told him that there was no real Philosopher's Stone. There were tattoos of Ouroboros on Lust, gluttony, and envy's bodies. This meant that they were homunculi. Then, Lust killed the priest by stabbing his head with her finger. Captain Hughes, his wife, Ed, Al, and Winry were having dinner together. They had conversation about various topics. The captain loved his pregnant wife so much. At night, Ed had a dream. In his dream, he saw the accident where Al lost his body. He was standing in a place that was surrounded by white. There was a black wall there. He saw a smoking shadow was sitting and calling him. Ed asked about who he was. That shadow said that he was what Ed called the world, the universe, God, the truth, and all, and also Ed. The wall split into two and pulled Ed inside of it with something. Ed was brought to a light. He saw his mother there. Suddenly he returned to the place he had been before. He became more sure that he was close to the truth about human transmutation. He was told that everything needed exchange and sacrifice. He then remembered about his sacrifice to bring his brother back. He woke up from his sleep and saw Al by his side. Al talked about nightmares that always occurred to Ed. The next day, Ed, Al, and Winry were taken by Colonel Roy and Captain Hughes to Dr. Tucker's house. He told them that Dr. Tucker created Chimera which was able to talk 2 years ago, but after it said 3 words, "Let me die," the Chimera then died. At Dr. Tucker's house, they were greeted by Dr. Tucker, his daughter Nina, and his dog Alexander. There were many messy books in Dr. Tucker's house because his wife had gone. Dr. Tucker and Ed were having a conversation meanwhile Al, Winry, and Nina were playing. Dr. Tucker told about the target that was given to him by the government to invent something new. He had tried but he failed. Dr. Tucker showed the Chimera he created to Ed. Ed was amazed by it. He asked about the Chimera which was able to talk that Dr. Tucker created 2 years ago. Ed told him about his arm transmutation to put Al's spirit into the steel armor. He would also give his body to bring Al's body back. Dr. Tucker said that he would try to help him. The next day, Winry and Ed went on a journey to meet a crystal alchemist, Dr. Marco. They left Al at Dr. Tucker's house to be studied. During their journey, Ed was worrying about Al. He also remembered Nina who loved to play with him. Ed and Winry were laughing and talking in a train to Dr. Marco's house. At Dr. Tucker's house, Al was covered in blanket. Dr. Tucker said that Ed might lie to Al. Al felt dizzy and finally fell asleep. Ed and Winry arrived at Dr. Marco's house. Dr. Marco pointed a gun to them. Ed tried to stop him. Dr. Marco fell unconscious. After he woke up, Ed asked him about the Philosopher's Stone, but Dr. Marco told him to go and stay away from that stone. Dr. Marco shot again, but his target wasn't Ed. It was Lust who was outside. The wound in Lust's chest disappeared because she wasn't human. She was immune to bullet. The second shot didn't kill her too. She attacked Dr. Marco, Ed, and Winry with her fingers. She killed Dr. Marco with her fingers and left after that. Before Dr. Marco died, he told Ed to transmute the stone and mentioned about the Laboratory 5. Ed left Winry to take care of Dr. Marco's body and returned to Dr. Tucker's house. As he arrived at Dr. Tucker's house, Dr. Tucker showed him the Chimera he created which was able to talk. Dr. Tucker introduced Ed to the Chimera. Ed was amazed by it. But suddenly, when that Chimera asked Ed to play with it, Ed realized about something. He realized that the Chimera that was created by Dr. Tucker was Nina and Alexander. He also realized that the Chimera that Dr. Tucker created 2 years ago was his wife. He beat Dr. Tucker up immediately. Dr. Tucker had done crazy things just to get recognition and not lose his job. Dr. Tucker said that he and Ed were just the same. They both transmuted human which caused Ed lost his body parts and Al lost his body. Ed became more furious to hear it. He beat Dr. Tucker repeatedly until Al stopped him. Dr. Tucker was arrested by the military. After that incident, Ed studied hard to find a way to get the Philosopher's Stone. Captain Hughes came to offer him a help. He also brought Lieutenant Ross with him to help Ed. After they tried to find information about the Laboratory 5, the general came and gave them a clue about the location of the Laboratory 5. Ed rushed himself to go there. A soldier came to inform about the chaos in Riol. Ed, Al, and Winry arrived at the location that was told by the general. They found nothing there. Ed got frustrated with it. Al questioned about himself. He asked Ed if his body was real or just a false memory that was made up by Ed. He was not sure because of what Dr. Tucker said to him. Ed and Al got into a fight. They hurt and attacked each other. Ed hit Al repeatedly with his left hand until it was bleeding. Al asked Ed to use his right hand because his left hand might get injured. Winry scolded Al for saying that Ed had lied to him. Ed had done everything to bring Al's body back. Ed got up and hit Al again. Al told him that he was hurt. Ed promised that he would bring Al's body back. Captain Hughes noticed that there was something wrong with the map. He looked closer to find the location of the Laboratory 5. After he found the exact location of the Laboratory 5, Lust came and approached him. She attacked him by stabbing his right shoulder. The captain threw a knife to Lust's head. Captain Hughes left and called Colonel Roy. Suddenly Colonel Roy was right behind him. He shot him instantly. The soldiers came and brought Ed to Eastern Headquarters. But instead of being brought there, he was getting arrested with Lieutenant Riza. The lieutenant told Ed that Captain Hughes had been killed by Colonel Roy and Dr. Tucker had been released. They worked together and managed to get away. They were heading to the prisoner of war camp where the Laboratory 5 was located. Colonel Roy arrived at the Laboratory 5. He was stopped by Lieutenant Ross and several soldiers. Ed and Lieutenant Riza also arrived there. The colonel knew that she wasn't Lieutenant Ross. She was Envy who was in disguise. She was also the one who killed Captain Hughes and disguised herself as Colonel Roy. Lust and Gluttony came and approached them. The colonel told Ed that they weren't human. Captain Hughes was the one who told Colonel Roy about the truth of the Laboratory 5. The colonel shot them repeatedly, but it was useless. Envy was ordered to go because someone had released Dr. Tucker. Meanwhile, Gluttony was ordered to eat the soldiers. Lust stabbed the colonel with her finger and left. Ed chased them immediately. He arrived in the Laboratory 5, where Drive Tucker took Winry and Alabama as his hostages. Dr. Tucker told Ed to remove his automail arm so he couldn't perform transmutation. Dr. Tucker showed Ed the Philosopher's Stone in his hand and that he was standing in a transmutation circle. He told Ed that the Philosopher's Stone that he had been looking for all this time was made of transmutation of alive human beings. It was done by the scientists, including Dr. Marco. In that laboratory, there were many Philosopher's Stones up there that were made of innocent human beings. Dr. Tucker pointed a gun to Ed, but he was killed by Lust instantly. Colonel Roy and Riza arrived at Ed's location. Lust asked someone who had been watching over there to come out. The person behind all of this was General Alcrow. He used Dr. Tucker to find out about how to use the Philosopher's Stone. He would use the Philosopher's Stone to transmute himself into soldiers so he could be strong and ruling the country. Then, he started to send the Philosopher's Stones to the dolls up there to make them alive. Thousands of dolls fell and the general came to greet them. Those dolls called him Papa and approached him, but those dolls ate him alive. Because there were too many dolls, the colonel decided to burn them. He found out about their weaknesses, which were their heads. He told Lieutenant Riza to cut off their heads. Al and Winry finally woke up. They also fought those dolls. Ed chased Lust and Envy. Colonel Roy came and burned Envy. He wanted to kill both of them. At the same time, Al tried to stop those dolls and Gluttony tried to eat them. There were also the soldiers which were led by Lieutenant Riza outside. They were ready to shoot those dolls. Lust and Envy were still fighting Colonel Roy. Lust tried to kill Colonel Roy, but luckily, Ed came in time and stopped her. Lust showed Ed and Colonel Roy that she lived with the help of the Philosopher's Stone which functioned as her heart inside of her chest. Envy told them that everything that had been done by Colonel Roy wasn't enough to kill her. Ed and Colonel Roy finally found out about Envy's weakness. She tried to run away but Colonel Roy burned him quickly. She was finally gone. The furious Lust destroyed Ed's shield and grabbed Ed's arm, but fortunately Al came and rescued Ed in time. Colonel Roy took advantage of Lust's weakness and burned her repeatedly. He took the Philosopher's Stone inside of Lust's chest with his hand. Lust finally died. The colonel gave Ed the stone for him to use. He used the stone to go to the Gate of Truth. He saw the shadow he met before in Al's body there. That shadow offered him an exchange, but suddenly Ed canceled his plan. He finally woke up. Ed apologized to Al for still being unable to bring his body back because he had to sacrifice one human life. Ed said that Al's body was tall and gorgeous. Lieutenant Riza came. The light also came and touched them. Ed was sitting in a train. There were also Al and Winry who were playing cards. Season 2 opens up by a young man from the city of Ishval called Scar. He got his name because of the scar on his forehead. He was defeating an alchemist from the city of Amestris. It seemed that he was holding grudges against the alchemists from that city. Two alchemists, Ed and Al, almost missed their train. Inside of the train, they encountered a young man called Ling Yao who came from the Qing Empire. Ling said that he came to Amestris to look for a sulfur stone, a red-colored stone that was believed had an ability to fulfill someone's wishes. He planned to use that stone to gain immortality. Not long after that, some bandits got inside of that train. Those bandits were defeated by two of Ling's subordinates. Apparently, Ling had planned to meet Ed and Al because he knew that they had information about the sulfur stone. Because Ed and Al refused to tell them about it, they got into a fight. The Ling subordinates used bombs as their weapons. Ed almost fell from the train because of it. Fortunately, Envy, who disguised herself as Captain Hughes, managed to save him. Since Envy was a homunculus who lived by a sulfur stone, Ling and his subordinates targeted her. After that, Ed and Al got inside of the train to tie the bandits. A bandit said that it was useless because he had broken the railway brake so all of them could die together. They did that because they wanted to kill a government official who was inside of that train. Before Ed and Al managed to stop it, the bandits kicked them out of the train. But with his alchemical power, Ed managed to stop the train. At the station, Colonel Roy and Lieutenant Riza caught the bandits who had made some troubles. Surprisingly, the government official who was almost killed by the bandits was the president, King Bradley. As Ed arrived at the military base, he received a report about a murderer of alchemists who was terrorizing Amestris. Since Ed and Al were also alchemists, Colonel Roy assigned several bodyguards to guard them, but because Ed and Al didn't like to be followed, they decided to run away. While they were running, they encountered a woman who also came from Qing Empire called Mei Chong and her little panda called Xiami. Just like Ling, Mei Chong also came to that place to look for a sulfur stone. Instead of thanking Ed for helping her, Mei Chong insulted Ed by calling him short. Ed was mad and trying to catch her. Mei Chong was rescued by a hooded man who turned out to be Scar. He was the murderer of alchemists who had been terrorizing the city. Ed and Al were scared by him. They decided to run away. Unluckily, they failed because it was easy for Scar to chase them. They finally got into a fight because there was no option. The strong Scar managed to defeat Ed and Al. He destroyed their prosthetic arms easily. When he was about to kill Ed, Colonel Roy and his troop came to rescue him. Because it was impossible for Scar to defeat all of them, he decided to escape from that place. At the office, Colonel Roy told a story about Scar. Scar came from a small region called Ishval. The Ishvalan were known as firm believers in God, so they went against the alchemists. In addition, a few years ago, Ishval and Amestris got into a civil war which caused many Ishvalan lost their lives and homes. Since then, the Ishvalan were hostile to the Amestrians, so those might be the reasons why Scar came to Amestris and murdered many national alchemists. While Scar was escaping through an underground passage, he stumbled upon Envy and Gluttony who were chased by Ling. The next day, Ed met a prosthetic mechanic called Pinocchio who was also Winry's teacher. As usual, when Ed's arm was broken, Winry was the person who would fix it. While Winry was creating a new arm, Ed visited her mother's grave. There he encountered his father who was called Van Hohenheim. The relationship between the father and the son was not good because of the family problem in the past. The injured Scar was found by Mei Chong and brought to a village in Ishval. After Scar was treated, he finally woke up. He met his teacher who advised him about his behavior all this time. The teacher warned Scar to not hold grudges for too long, that he killed many innocent people. After Ed visited her mother's grave, he visited the country of Xerxes which had been destroyed by the war. He once heard a conversation between his father and Pinocchio about the city of Amestris that would be destroyed like the country of Xerxes. Suddenly, he was attacked by the Ishvalan there. Fortunately, he was saved by an elder called Sean. Sean told her people that despite the Ishvalan went against the alchemists, not all alchemists were bad people, such as 2 alchemist doctors who had saved many lives. Surprisingly, the 2 alchemist doctors she was talking about were Winry's mother and father. Sean told about their kindness, but unfortunately, they were killed by a patient that they treated, which was Scar. After Ed fixed his arm, he returned to his city. He encountered King Bradley and his son, Salim, there. After that, Ed came home to fix Ael's body. At home, Ed mentioned about what his father said to Pinocchio, about their city that would be destroyed soon and the homunculi that wouldn't let humans die. Not long after that, Ling came and said that he had heard the conversation between Ed and Al. He was curious about the secret of homunculi's immortality, so he asked Ed and Al to collaborate with him to kidnap a homunculus to be studied. As the mark of their collaboration, he told them that he was actually a prince of Qing Empire and Mei Chong was his sister. Since the Emperor of Qing was already old, he wanted to find a successor. Because of it, all princes and princesses tried to find the sulfur stone to show their skills to the Emperor. They created a plan to make Scar show himself so the homunculi would also show themselves. The next day, Ed and Ling's plan went well because Scar finally showed himself. This time, Ed decided to not run away and fought Scar face to face. At the same time, Winry arrived at the city to return Ed's belonging that was left in her house. During their fight, Ed mentioned about Winry's parents who had been killed by Scar. Winry accidentally heard what he said. When she found out about that, Winry was heartbroken and angry at Scar. She took a gun and tried to kill him, but Ed stopped her because he didn't want her to become a murderer. What Ed just did reminded Scar of his late brother. His brother was trying to protect Scar back then. He even sacrificed his life. At the same time, Ling and his subordinates were fighting the homunculi. When they were fighting, suddenly King Bradley came. King Bradley saw Ling and his subordinates as troublemakers, so he tried to fight them. When Ling and his subordinates were about to run away, they threw a bomb which accidentally removed the president's eye patch. For the first time, a homunculus symbol could be seen on King Bradley's eye. Did it mean that King Bradley was a homunculus? Al and Ed were still fighting Scar. When they were fighting, suddenly Gluttony came and attacked Scar. When Ling saw that, he joined the fight to attack Gluttony. He put a bomb inside of Gluttony's body to blow up his body so he could catch him easily. After that, Lieutenant Riza and Winry came and shot Scar. They gave Ling a ride to bring Gluttony's body. Mei Chong passed by that place and saw Scar got injured. She decided to rescue him. Unfortunately, while she was rescuing him, she didn't realize that Xiami got left behind. At the office, Ling's subordinates were treated because they got injured by King Bradley's attacks. Ling said that there was a homunculus symbol on King Bradley's eye. Gluttony, who got caught, was angry when he saw Colonel Roy. He still remembered well how Colonel Roy killed his leader, Lust. In another room, Ed asked Lieutenant Riza about what was actually happening between Ishval and Amestris. 7 years ago, when the civil war between those two regions took place, the President King Bradley ordered the national alchemists to help the military and fight the Ishvalian. During that war, Scar became a victim who almost lost his life. But when he woke up, he realized that his brother had sacrificed his hand so he still could live. Scar was angry at Winry's parents because he thought they had saved him by sacrificing his brother. Since then, Scar had been holding grudges to avenge his brother's death. The next day, Al used Xiami whom he found before to find Scar's whereabouts. After he returned Xiami to Mei Chong, Ed and Al followed Mei so they could find where Scar was hiding. When Ed arrived at an abandoned building, he attacked Scar immediately. He managed to attack Scar because Scar was still wounded. As he expected, Scar escaped through an underground hole. Al had been waiting downstairs to catch him, but apparently, Scar didn't only destroy one floor, but all floors in that building. Not long after that, Colonel Roy, Winry, and Lieutenant Riza arrived at that place. Winry saw Scar, who had been caught, and approached him. Even though she was angry at him, she still treated him when she saw his injuries. Winry's kindness touched Scar a little. He remembered the advice of his teacher, who told him to let go of his anger, which was still controlling him. If he kept holding onto his anger, the cycle of hatred would keep going for eternity. Because of that, Scar apologized to Winry, even though his apology wouldn't change anything. Suddenly, Ling came with Gluttony, who was enraged and trying to kill Colonel Roy. He attacked anyone near him. When Gluttony was about to attack Winry, Scar was trying to stop him so Winry and the others could run away. After that, Envy came to stop and remind Gluttony that they weren't allowed to kill humans, but since Gluttony was already enraged, he ate everyone there, including Ling, Ed, and Envy. Al, who saw that, tried to tell Gluttony to spew his brother. Inside of Gluttony's stomach, Ed and Ling asked Envy about the exit. Envy told them that Gluttony's stomach was a failed product of the Gate of Truth that was created by their father, so they could never exit through Gluttony's stomach. They would be there for eternity until they died. Before they died, Envy revealed about her true identity, where she could transform herself into a monster. Van Hohenheim was on a journey to somewhere. In the middle of his journey, the carriage that he was riding was attacked by a group of bandits. Van was rescued by a couple, Sick and Izumi. Apparently, they were Ed and Al's teachers. Izumi said that she had visited the Gate of Truth and sacrificed some of her internal organs. She was often in pain because of that. After Van heard that, he tried to help Izumi by healing her internal organs. Because of his help, Izumi felt so much better. Al was still with Gluttony. When Al asked how to bring his brother back, Gluttony mentioned about someone that he called Father, the creator of homunculi. After Al heard that, he asked Gluttony to take him to the father. They didn't realize that Mei Chong and Scar were following them. They entered a place underneath Central and met the father of Homunculus, who looked like Van Hohenheim. Inside of Gluttony's stomach, Ed saw a road to the Gate of Truth. He transmuted himself to go to the Gate of Truth so he could get out of Gluttony's stomach. After he did transmutation, he finally arrived at the Gate of Truth. Ed attempted to rescue Al's soul there, but he failed. A few minutes later, Ed, Ling, and Envy finally got out of Gluttony's stomach. When the father of Homunculus found out that Ed and Al were Van's sons, he was surprised and glad because he had been knowing Van for a long time. The relationship between Van and the father of Homunculus was unknown, but the father of Homunculus asked Ed to take care of his body until the time come. After that, the father of Homunculus asked Gluttony to eat Ling because he wasn't useful anymore, but Ed and Al saved him immediately. Unfortunately, Ed and Al couldn't use their alchemical powers there. There was liquid that came from a philosopher's stone in the father of Homunculi's eye. Father wanted to transform Ling into a homunculus. Ling had been wanting the philosopher's stone, so he gladly gave his body to a homunculus called Greed. Not long after that, Scar and Mei Chong arrived at that place. Unlike Ed and Al, Scar and Mei Chong could use their alchemical powers. They used that moment to attack the father of Homunculus, but they were too weak. Because Ed and the others were unable to defeat the father of Homunculus, they decided to run away. At the central headquarters, Bradley finally admitted that he was a homunculus. He used to be a human being, but he transformed into a homunculus after a philosopher's stone was inserted into his body. He didn't kill Colonel Roy yet because Colonel Roy was still useful for him. The next day, Scar and the others visited the laboratory of Scar's brother. They found a book that contained all research notes that had been written by Scar's brother there. If they could study and arrange all of those notes, they might find an answer about what was the actual meaning of the promised day. For days, Mei Chong and the others tried to find the messages from those notes. One evening, when they were having a discussion, suddenly Ling came and passed out. As usual, when Ling had taken control of his body, he felt extremely hungry, so Ling and Greed agreed to take control of their body according to their needs. Ling received an information from Greed that the father of Homunculus would open the Gate of Truth and Ed must stop him. After Ling left, Mei Chong had an idea to arrange all research notes of Scar's brother. After they arranged all those notes, they could see a picture of Philosopher's Stone Transmutation Circle. That picture represented the area of Amestris. If they looked closer, all points in that area were the locations of the coups and civil war. This meant that all coups and wars that happened all this time were a part of Homunculi's plan to create a formation of Philosopher's Stone by sacrificing humans from many regions. There was a region that didn't have a symbol of blood on that map. That region was Briggs. After they found out about that, Ed and the others were sharing tasks. Ed was going to Briggs, Al was assigned to meet Van Hohenheim, and Scar and Mei Chong stayed there to study the research notes. When Scar and Mei Chang had a discussion, they accidentally found something on other sides of the research notes. When all of its pages were turned, they saw another picture. It was a reverse nationwide transmutation circle, which was believed to be a way to stop everything. Ed arrived at Briggs and met Major General Olivier Mira Armstrong there. While Ed and Olivier were walking, suddenly Briggs was attacked by a homunculus called Sloth. Sloth was shot with various weapons, but he was immune to them. They pushed him out and poured liquid on his body, which caused his body got frozen suddenly. After that, Olivier had a guest. It was General Raven who came with Winry. Winry was invited to fix Ed's arm, but she didn't realize that she was taken as a hostage. General Raven implicitly warned Ed that if Ed dared to do something they didn't like, Winry would be in danger. After that, Olivier asked Ed about the purpose of his visit. While they were talking about everything, they were passing through a tunnel that was made by the homunculi. Based on his observation, Ed thought that the tunnel was a giant circle that was surrounding Amestris, so the homunculi could easily practice the Philosopher's Stone transmutation someday. At the same time, Al finally met his father. He told his father that the father of Homunculus looked exactly like him. He also told him that they had a plan to stop the promised day. Because everything had already happened, Van Hohenheim told Al everything. When Van was a child, he was known as a slave called Slave Number 23. Back then, the government transformed Van's blood into a homunculus with a shape of dark lump. As his gratitude for being created by Van, the homunculus gave Van a name, which was Van Hohenheim. The dark lump also gave Van knowledges so he could free himself from the world of slavery. After Van gained all the knowledges, he asked the dark lump to give the king an immortality. Unfortunately, the dark lump used that moment to take control of everything he wanted. He killed everybody, took over of the king's body, and changed his physical body to look like Van Hohenheim. The father of Homunculus said that he had given everything to Van Hohenheim, so, as the return, all humans in that country would belong to him. Van Hohenheim got frustrated because of it. He had been living in regret until this day. At night, while Ed and Ling were patrolling together, they were suddenly attacked by Gluttony and a homunculus called Pride who was hiding in Al's body. Luckily, a Ling subordinate who was called Lon Fan came at the right time, so Ed and Ling managed to escape from that place. They met Salim, the King Bradley's son, in the woods. They found out that Salim was a medium for Pride, a homunculus who possessed a power of shadow. After that, Fan and another Ling subordinate came to help them. Behind Salim, Al appeared to catch him. With just one foot stomp, Fan managed to trap Salim and Al. She had to do that so Salim couldn't do anything in the darkness. Not long after that, Scar and Mei Chang came to inform that they had made a reverse nationwide transmutation circle. The next day, all groups finally started to move, including Ed's group and Colonel Roy's group who would fight King Bradley's group and the father of Homunculus. Colonel Roy's group started to carry out a coup d'etat by destroying a train which carried Bradley's group and destroying several places in the city. The military began to panic because they had been waiting for the promised day to gain immortality. That idea was opposed by General Olivier who was siding with Ed and his friends. During that argument, Slot suddenly came and attacked Olivier. Luckily, she could still be rescued by her brother, Alex. Salim hit Al's steel head repeatedly. Apparently, it was a signal for the father of Homunculus. A few minutes later, Gluttony came to save Salim. Because Salim felt hungry, he wasn't hesitant to eat Gluttony who came to help him. At the same time, Ed, Mei Chang, and Scar found a Philosopher's Stone transmutation circle underneath Central. When they opened a door, they were suddenly attacked by a troop of dolls. Because there were too many of them, Ed and the others were overwhelmed. But they managed to be rescued by Colonel Roy who came and burnt the troop of dolls. After that, Indy came to take revenge on Colonel Roy for killing Lust. She transformed herself into a monster but Colonel Roy defeated her. Because of the attack from Colonel Roy, Indy became a tiny monster. When Colonel Roy tried to kill her, Lieutenant Riza stopped him quickly because Colonel Roy was being controlled by his anger. When Indy saw such human kindness, she was jealous of them. She decided to kill herself by removing a Philosopher's Stone from her body. At the same time, Van Hohenheim met the father of Homunculus. The father of Homunculus attacked Van Hohenheim and took 500,000 souls from him. Apparently, the souls that had just been transferred to the father of Homunculus's body had cooperated with Van Hohenheim. All of those souls were enraged. They transformed the father of Homunculus's body into a giant dark lump. Two Armstrongs were still fighting Sloth. They were finally saved by Izumi and her husband. After that, Olivier received an information that her troop managed to seize 90% of Central Headquarters. When they were about to celebrate their victory, King Bradley suddenly came and attacked Olivier's troop. Ling and his subordinates came to help the troop to fight King Bradley. During that fight, Ling's subordinate sacrificed himself to save his master. He put bombs on his body to blow up himself with King Bradley. Ling's subordinate finally died because Olivier's soldier tried to stab King Bradley by using his body. The furious Ling pushed King Bradley until he fell into the river. At Ed and the others' place, Selim did human transmutation, so Ed and his friend got separated from each other. Ed, Al, and Izumi were transferred to the place of the father of Homunculus, whose body had changed and contained Van Hohenheim. At another place, Colonel Roy was forced to do human transmutation. Apparently, King Bradley was still alive. He was assigned to attack Colonel Roy. After that, Colonel Roy was transferred to Ed and the others' place. The 5 victims that would be sacrificed on the promised day had been completed. Those victims were Ed, Al, Izumi, Van Hohenheim, and Colonel Roy. Because of the transmutation that had been done, Colonel Roy lost his vision. At the same time, Scar fought King Bradley face to face after Mei Chong and Riza found the others. Right at that time, a total solar eclipse occurred. The day that had been waited by the father of Homunculus finally arrived. The father of Homunculus activated the transmutation circle, which then took all human souls. All of those souls were absorbed by the father of Homunculus. With the power that he possessed that time, the father of Homunculus attempted to absorb God's energy and put it into his body. After the absorption was done, the father of Homunculus had a physical body like human. He was even able to hold the sun in his hand. Because the 5 victims were no longer useful for him, the father of Homunculus wanted to kill them. Surprisingly, all of these things had been predicted by Van Hohenheim. The 500,000 souls inside of his body had been released before the incident took place, so all of those souls would be absorbed by the father of Homunculus. Because of that, all souls that had been absorbed started to burst inside of the father of Homunculus's body. After the father of Homunculus found out about that, he became furious. He released all souls that he had absorbed. After Scar defeated King Bradley, he attempted to activate the reverse nationwide transmutation circle. The purpose of the transmutation was to neutralize everything that had been done by the father of Homunculus. The father of Homunculus was pressed by the situation. He had to get out of his hideout to create another Philosopher's Stone. While the others were chasing the father of Homunculus, Ed finished his business with Selim and killed him. The father of Homunculus hadn't finished creating the new Philosopher's Stone. He made a huge explosion which made Ed lost his prosthetic arm. Ed's arm was pierced by an iron from the ruins. The father of Homunculus wanted to transform Ed into a Philosopher's Stone. During that situation, Al decided to sacrifice himself to save his brother. He transmuted himself to bring Ed's right arm back. With that right arm, Ed managed to do alchemical transmutation. He managed to defeat the father of Homunculus. The father of Homunculus got up and tried to take Greed's soul from Ling's body, but that action made the father of Homunculus defeated because Greed had cooperated with them. After that, the dark lump of the father of Homunculus's body entered the gate of truth and finally got absorbed. When Ed found that Al hadn't returned, he decided to go to the Gate of Truth. He decided to sacrifice his alchemical power to bring Al's body back. Al finally got his body back. Even though Ed didn't have his alchemical power anymore, he didn't regret because he managed to bring his brother's body back.